I don't anticipate that being a problem. I think we're going to get out early. Just want to be cognizant of all of your. All right. So first of all, before we get started in here and I do my introductions a little bit, I want to just give you a quick overview of what this is going to look like. If you haven't done the webinar with me before and the functionality of this, you will not be able to talk to me physically, and you won't be able to see me. I don't have my camera on. What I'm going to be doing is sharing my screen. We're going to be going through the website and showing you where you can find some resources and talk about what those resources are and how they can benefit your classroom a little bit. But I want to make sure that everybody can hear me. So there are two ways that you can interact with me, and either one will work. It doesn't matter. You don't have to do both of them, but I do need you to try to do one of them at least. There is either a chat function on your there should be a bar that you can have some controls over. There should be one that says chat, which probably looks like a little chat bubble, like a little talking bubble. And there's one that says Q&A. Either of those works. The chat is probably a little bit easier because that allows you to actually interact with different participants if you wanted to, but you could actually just send it privately to me, or you can send a message to everyone. And then there's a Q&A, which just gets sent to me that I can just kind of view. It's really designed for questions, but it can be used for anything. I'm monitoring both of those, so if you can only find one of them, that's perfectly fine. What I'd like you to do, I just want to make sure everybody can hear me. So what I'd like you to do is in one of those boxes, either the chat or the Q&A, just tell me where you're listening from right now. So give me a city if you're in Phoenix. If you are someplace else, go ahead and if you're in another part of the state. So I have Phoenix or Tempe. I had one from Phoenix. There's a Tucson in here. Looks like got. Let's see. Some of these. Let me just make sure here. And just so you're aware, I'm doing all of this. I'm monitoring all of these chats and also handling technical difficulties and all that stuff all at the same time. So if you see me get quiet briefly, that's basically why. We have somebody from Wendon that's coming in. So it looks like Phoenix. We've got a few from Phoenix. We've got Wendon, Tucson. So basically down the central corridor of what it looks like. It looks like you guys can hear. That's the big thing. That this is how you can interact with me, and either of those boxes works. It doesn't matter which one you interact with. I will be monitoring throughout the workshop. So if I see a question anytime if a question pops up in your head, go ahead and put it in there. I will try to. I will answer it. It may not be right when it comes through. I may wait for some of the questions at the end. If there's something that's immediately relevant to what we're talking about, I may put it in there. So I will get to them at the end. There'll be some time for me to kind of monitor those a little bit and make sure that I've addressed all the questions as good as I can. The last thing I want to do is I believe I have a hard time seeing what you guys are seeing with the particular webinar software that we have. So can you just tell me, are you seeing the Game and Fish website right now? That's what I'm supposed to be sharing. So if you'll just put yes in the box, it should say Arizona Game and Fish little logo, and there's some pictures probably that are scrolling through. Good. That's what I was hoping you guys were seeing. So I just want to make sure, because that's how I found for this particular webinar, it's just going to be useful to just kind of point out directly where everything is so that you can find them when you're done here. And the last thing I'm going to mention to you before we jump into this is being recorded. So if any time you need to come back to this, there'll be an option for you to log back into this. This may or may not appear on the website later. I'll show you at the end where some of my previous webinars appear. This one may or may not. This is a slightly different format for the webinars. So it may not appear, or it may appear in pieces, in elements as I explain different aspects of resources that are available. But it is being recorded. So if for some reason you miss something, you can always reach out to me and I can send you the link. I think your login information will allow you to see the recording afterwards as done when this is completed. But if not, I can get you that information at the end. Plus, if something happens dramatically, I lose internet, you lose internet, just be aware of those types of things. I will try to get back on as soon as possible. It doesn't happen a lot, but it has happened in the past. I want to make sure that you're aware. If I happen to lose, if I cut out, I will try to log in as soon as possible. If you haven't lost connection, you should still be in there so that when I pop back in, it should work. But if I can't get the internet restored or anything like that, we'll have options to get back to at the end. So it is being recorded. And with that, then let's go ahead and get started. Let's first of all, I want to welcome you. This is the AZGFD Reading Resources webinar, where the focus is to give you some ideas and resources related to reading, specifically nonfiction texts that you can bring into your classroom or whatever your teaching situation happens to be. My name is Eric Proctor, and I am the Wildlife Education Coordinator for the Arizona Game and Fish Department. So in that role, I work primarily behind the scenes. So my job is to help you bring wildlife issues and wildlife concepts into the classroom. I do that primarily through workshops, so webinars like this, through in-person workshops where we take you out in the field with our biologists and we go over some lessons and activities that you might do in the classroom. And I also attend conferences and give presentations at conferences. So that's primarily what I do, is I work with you guys as the educator. I don't go into classrooms very often. I do on occasion, but if I did that, that would be all that I would do. So I want to make sure that we feel that there's value in reaching you guys as educators, because each of you is reaching anywhere from probably 25 to 150 students a year, if not more than that. And so by us helping you, we can spread the message even more. We can get more students to appreciate wildlife, the diversity of wildlife and the diversity of habitats that we have here in Arizona. So that's our goal. That's primarily what I do. As I mentioned, I work for the Arizona Game and Fish Department. If you are not familiar with who we are, there are a couple new people that are logged into this webinar. We are the state government agency that is responsible for managing Arizona's wildlife species. That's over 800 species that we're responsible for. Most people will interact with us through hunting and fishing. So when you go buy a hunting or fishing license, that license was distributed through us. Even if you bought it at a Walmart, or you bought it at a Dick's Sporting Goods, or you bought it at a Bass Pro, it's our hunting and fishing license. We use that money from that license to come back and actually help us with the management of those species. But we don't do just the hunted and fish species. We manage all of Arizona's wildlife, including the endangered species, including the species that you can't legally hunt and fish, all the native wildlife, which is over 800 species. That's what we are responsible for managing. Even though we are a government agency, we are not your typical government agency. We do not take general taxpayer dollars. So there is nothing from our income tax or sales tax that comes to the Arizona Game and Fish Department. We operate much more on a user pay model, in which it's the user of the resource that is the one that's paying for it. That's where those hunting licenses come in. So the user of the resource is the consumer of the resource. Right now is the hunter and the angler. They are paying for those resources. Um, that's the model that most wildlife agencies offer across the country, and we found that it's been a pretty successful model. Within Arizona Game and Fish Department, we do have a relatively robust education department. Many people think of us through the boating safety education and the sport fishing education, and even the hunter education. So those aspects of our conservation education program. However, we do have an extensive, as you'll see in just a minute here, wildlife education program. And our wildlife education program, which is called Focus Wild Arizona, is our classroom program, our K-12 formal classroom program. So that's where you're going to find lesson plans, workshops like these, the resources that I'm going to share with you today, all come under Focus Wild Arizona, which is our wildlife education program designed to help you as K-12 educators, whether you're in a classroom, whether you're in a non-formal or an informal setting, whether you're homeschool, a museum, a zoo, whatever that might be. We hope that we can provide quality, informative resources to help you bring this information into the classroom, into your teaching situation, and gain a greater appreciation and awareness of the wonderful wildlife that's found in Arizona. So that's kind of a quick little intro. What we're going to be spending most of the time on is the department's website, specifically the Focus Wild section of the website. But rather than telling you how to get to the Focus Wild website directly, we do have a website, that a direct link that you can go to. If you were to go to azgfd.org, AZGFD, so that's Arizona Game and Fish, so azgfd.gov/focuswild, you would take you directly to the site that I'm about to show you. However, I don't necessarily expect that you're going to remember that. And if you're looking for resources and you want to know, I wanted to show you how to navigate through the department's website to get to the same place. There's actually a couple different ways. I'm going to show you the easiest. So in front of me, you have our main Game and Fish website. You get here by doing azgfd.com, which you can see in the address bar in the upper left-hand corner. You can also get there by doing azgfd.gov. That will send you to the same website. Once you're here, you'll find all kinds of information, and you can spend hours perusing the Game and Fish website. There's a lot of good content and information that's buried in here. I'm not going to show you all of that. You can see that there are these links at the top: hunting, fishing, boating, shooting, OHV, wildlife, recreation, and there's a feedback section. The wildlife is probably going to be of most interest to you. That's where you're going to find some watchable wildlife programs and such. I'm not going to go through all of these. It's not here to show you everything that's on our website. But since we're here, I just figured I would show you some of the stuff. Up in the upper left-hand corner as well, you'll see this e-news sign up button. If you're interested in signing up for any of our listservs, including the educator email listserv that I send out, which is where I will announce new workshops, that you can do by clicking on that e-news sign up that's in the upper left-hand corner. You just click on that, you put in your email address, and you mark newsletters that you're interested in going. So we have a wildlife one, we have a fishing one, we have a hunting one, there's a general wildlife news one, there's an endangered species one, I think, and then there's an educator one. There's a variety of them. You can go on there and you can get all kinds of information. You select the ones that you want. But where we're going to spend our time is all the way down at the bottom. I'm sure most of you guys aren't that surprised that education has sometimes been demoted down to the bottom. There's a whole bunch, in addition to those upper tabs that you saw, there's a whole bunch of other links down at the bottom. And you're going to want to find the section here that says education. And then right here, I've been able to manage, there's a section that says teachers. If you click on that, it's going to take you directly to the website. You can also get there by clicking on education, and then you have to do one more click to get to the teacher section. But if you click on teachers, now you get to the Focus Wild website. So once you're here, you know you're kind of in the right spot. You see our little teacher quail. It says teaching and learning about wildlife. It says Focus Wild on the left-hand side. This is the right spot. And most of what you're going to be interested in, we're going to be looking at is on the left-hand side. We have all these resources tabs over here. We're going to spend all of our time today in the resources section. And then also there's a popular link section. So when we get something that's new sometimes, or that is in high demand, we'll put it in this popular link section. We're going to be coming back to one of these in a minute. I want to end with our nonfiction text, because that's the stuff that's in there is the key of what we want to be talking about today, the core of what I want to focus on. But I want to show you some other resources related to reading that might be of interest to you prior to jumping in there. So we'll come back to this front page in just a minute. So is come over here and you can see the lesson section. If you click on that, you're going to find some grade level lessons on different topics. So if you're looking for lessons on adaptations for 3rd grade, there's ways to search around, for example, in there. Our workshop section, if you're interested in finding more workshops like this webinar or some of the in-person workshops, that's where you'll go. You'll see a calendar with some of those events. I only have one more open right now. That's a webinar that I'm doing on November 20th. So similar to this one, but it's actually more content driven. It's actually going to be on, we're going to go through a lesson in that one. Classroom programs, this one's going to be changing. We actually, the person that runs our classroom programs is retiring. We're in the process of hiring that position. We don't know what that's going to look like, so we're not going to spend a lot there. We're going to spend our time in the resources section. So I'm going to click on the resources tab. And you can see here now that we have classroom resources, and there's all kinds of different resources that we've kind of grouped by some major topics. And again, at any time, if you have questions or you want to see something specifically, maybe it's not directly related to what we're talking about, go ahead and throw it into the chat or the Q&A, and we'll try to address it here. But we have all kinds of resources. I'm not going to talk about all of these because, again, the focus of this webinar is on reading resources. So we're going to start with the section here that says student activity pages. And I'm going to start with the one that says Focus Wild Arizona. Now, when you click on this, it's going to bring you to a different website that's more database driven, that has a variety of links on it. Now, Focus Wild in addition to being our education program, was a 2-page reading lesson that used to appear in our magazine. I'm going to show you our magazine in just a little bit, but this used to appear in the Game and Fish magazine that got published every 2 months. And what it was it allowed me to kind of do a general interest kind of activity. There was some reading and then there was an activity associated with it. These aren't specifically standards based and they're not necessarily designed specifically for the classroom because again, it's a general interest magazine. They were designed for the parent who gets the magazine and wants to have their kid learn a little bit about a topic, but they do have relevance in the classroom, as you're going to see in a little bit as I bring up some of these. So as you scroll down, I did this for about 7 or 8 years. I have it organized by year, but you can see in here then that there are different topics that are in here. So if you're looking for a particular one, you can go through here. I'm just going to pull up one as an example here. See, what do I want to do? We'll just do one here on bald eagles, for example, the January and February 2009 one. So when I click on this, and again, I haven't logged in, there's been no requirement for me to log in. This is general public access. You can see here's the 2-page article, the 2-page article. So what this is designed to do is to have some reading activities. There's on all of these, there's vocabulary that's introduced. And so that there's some vocabulary introduction, and then there's usually some kind of activity. This one happens to have a math one. So it says the table at the top of the next page shows some data biologists have collected about baby bald eagle survival. The table shows the number of places in the state where bald eagles could have reproduced. They have to actually create a graph with this one. And so you'll see the data here. There's the data. They have to go through and create a graph, and then they answer some questions based on the graphing information. So this is kind of a combo activity where they do some reading, and then they have to extract some information based off of the reading that's in there. And so there's a whole bunch of these that you saw on this last. You'll see there's a number of them. Now, the other thing that I've done is I've created basically an Excel file, essentially the equivalent of Excel file, which shows the vocabulary list. So if you were to click on this vocabulary list, it's actually going to bring up a Google Sheet, and then it has all the words that are introduced over every single issue of this. Tells you how we defined it in there, and then it shows you which issue you could find that in. So if there were specific words that you needed students to work with that you wanted to develop in students, you have that option here. So let's say you wanted to focus on adaptations, that you were doing a lesson on adaptations, you wanted to introduce that concept, you have it here, and then it just so happens that there are 5 issues in which we introduce that term adaptations. Now, rather than you having to go back and find it, these are all hyperlinked in here. So if you were interested and you wanted to see what the July of 2006 issue was, you just scroll over it, and then you click on the little link that pops up, and it brings up that same, not the same one. This is going to be a different one probably. And so this one happens to be on. What this one is about. Oh, this is a water one where the kids actually run a little experiment where they have to try to keep a sponge wet throughout the day, and so they can do different things to the sponge to give it adaptation so that it might more likely lose less water throughout the day when it's sitting out in the sun. That's hyperlinked in there for you, so you have the ability to move through all of these different pages. So if there's specific words, or your kids need specific words, or you want to assign one of these as homework, there are 2 pages. You can double side them, print them out, give them to your students. Very simple stuff to do there. So that's the Focus Wild activity sheets. I'm going to go ahead and go to the main page. So we're back here, and we'll see student activity pages. There's another set of student activity pages. These are older. So the Focus Wild ones are more recent, but even those ended in 2013. They still have the information is still good because they're general concepts, adaptations, habitat, connectivity, those types of things. Wild Kids was similar to what we did with Focus Wild, except they didn't appear in our magazine. They appeared in a newsletter that we used to send out to educators. And so this would appear like once every 3 or 4 months, I think. We'd send them quarterly. And there would be 3 of them. They were grade banded. So there was a K3 one, a 4-6 one, and a 7-12 one on various topics. So again, you click on Wild Kids activities. You see a very similar sheet, but this time you'll have all the different topics here. And then depending on what you want, whether you're a kindergarten teacher, a fifth grade teacher, or you teach high school, whatever it is, there's an activity related to that topic at that appropriate grade level. So I'm going to give you just an example here. Let's say we're teaching about uh, animal relationships. Okay. So you could go down here to number 13 and you could click on K3 if you're a first grade teacher and you wanted to talk about animal relationships. You can see the text is larger at this level. There's a little activity. This one happens to introduce and focuses on predator and prey. There's a little activity they can do, and then there's a coloring sheet that actually has them answer some questions. Very simple to do. But then as you scroll up and you start going, so we're moving from animal relationships K3, now we're going to go to the 4 to 6 grade band. And it gets just a little bit more complicated. Now we start talking about mutualism and commensalism and parasitism, those forms of symbiotic relationships. There's a little bit of reading. Again, our focus is on reading. So there's some reading that the kids do. And then there's an activity where they have to try to figure out, they read a paragraph and they have to try to figure out what type of symbiotic relationship is it? Is this a mutualistic relationship? Is it a commensal relationship? Or is it a parasitic relationship based on what they do? And then there's another activity focused on saguaros in this particular one. And then still scaling up. So we started with the K3 band. We just showed you the 4-6 band. Now we're going to do 7-12. Now, again, all of this is within that topic of animal relationships. These are older. I don't even have a date on these, but it has our old logos on them. So some of the information might be a little dated, especially if you're talking about species information, but the general content is going to be okay. We had originally removed these. We didn't have access to them anymore, and then teachers asked for them, so we decided to put them back. So that's where they come from. It doesn't take us anything to throw the PDFs on the website. And so you'll see here's more information. This is focused on mimicry. It's at a little bit higher of a reading level for the kids to be able to address at a 7 through 12 level. And then you can see there's some activities. This one has a crossword, and then there is different types of mimicry. And they have to answer very similar to the one that was at 4-6, but instead of focusing on symbiotic relationships, they're focusing on mimicry. So this is similar to those magazine ones that I showed you that are Focus Wild. We just have these are slightly older, but we make them available to you. You can see there are about 30 of them. Not all of them have all of the 3 grade bands. So since some of the stuff is so old, we lost access to some of them. So as I find them, I do try, but we've gone through most of our files now. We even had some that were made on an old file that isn't supported anymore, a digital copy that isn't supported anymore, but we were able to extract them still and try to convert them over. But you can see here the Raptors one, the Birds of Prey number 16, we're missing 4 through 6. I doubt we're going to find it. It's just not available unless some teacher's has it somewhere that we can scan it. You can also see that there's a couple that actually have some Spanish versions. So right here, number 25 and 26, the second one focused on native fish because there's one earlier that's on native fish. But there's the 3 regular ones, and then they have a Spanish version at K3 and 4-6, and then Fire Ecology has a 4-6 Spanish. So if you have kids that need that, that's an option for you. So continuing on here, I'm going to shut down some of these windows here just to clean it up a little bit. We go back now. So we focus on the student activity pages. Very simple readings if you're looking for a substitute teacher activity or some supplemental work that kids need on particular topics, or you're looking for some homework assignments, things like that. Those are some quick activities you might be able to grab. If you're looking for fact sheets and you want kids to be able to decipher fact sheets, this is another one that I didn't put on the website originally, but I felt there's lots of fact sheets out there. If you're looking for information on animals, there's tons of, just about every zoo has information. Google, you Google and you can find information on animals, but people asked for them. They wanted to be able to come to the Game and Fish website and they wanted to be able to extract animal information that they could bring into the classroom. So what we did is we have 2 versions. These are under the wildlife fact sheets. There's what we're calling field notes, and there's research abstracts. There are varying levels of difficulty. We're going to start with the field notes. Now, the field notes, once again, are a piece that's contained inside our magazine. So every issue of our magazine has a field note. So it just focuses on one particular animal, and it's really just a 1-page fact sheet about that animal. And that's found in every single issue of our magazine. So what I've been doing is collecting all of those, digitizing them, turning them into PDFs, and making them available to you. So every time a new magazine comes out, a new field notes goes up on our website. And so you go through here. Now they're organized by type of animal, animal group. So if you're looking for information on any particular type of animal, the ones that we have published in our magazine are all found on here. And you can see we have them all over the place. So if you are interested in learning about mountain lions, you can click on the mountain lion. And again, it's just going to bring up, for the most part, a one-page PDF. This one I think is an older version. This is from one of our older ones, but it's just a fact sheet. But again, you may be having your kids, you may need this for some of your kids to be able to extract some information. It is a type of reading. Kids have to read this, extract relevant information from it. So there's a fact sheet on mountain lions. If you're interested in the great, you're doing stuff on birds. Here's another one. I think this one is a little bit more recent. This is actually a way older one. So I really went through our archives. I pulled from really, really old magazines. You can see this one came from 1996, but we don't have a more recent one. We may eventually, when we get a more recent one, I replace it with the more recent one. We just haven't gone back and done this one yet. Let me see if I can find a much more recent one. It shouldn't be that difficult. Let's do like rosy boa, which is a type of snake that we have in Arizona, the only boa constrictor that's found in Arizona. This is an old one too. I picking the wrong ones, but you can get an idea. This one's actually from 1994, so you can see they go back quite some time on some of these, but there are lots of them in here. Let's try the elegant trogon, which is a really cool looking bird that's found in southeastern Arizona. This is an old one as well. Wouldn't know that I would pull up every single old one that we have. We're going to do a ringneck snake because I'm pretty sure that's a slightly more recent one. This is a little bit more recent. So you can see now there's a drawing, there's information about it, and this one is from 2010, so not quite as far out. So these go quite far back, 1994, all the way up to current times. I got to put the newest issue up actually. So if you're looking for fact sheets, quick little fact sheets for your kids to work with, and incorporate these in some of our other workshops when I do some writing activities. If you need information on an animal and you just want to create a library of these, they're really easy to make available in your classroom. The one that say research abstracts, these are more technical. So these are technical reports about specific animals that we manage. So they're actually in our non-game branch. So this isn't an education product. This is on our main website, but we're directing you to it. So let's say you're interested in learning about mammals again. So these are going to be non-game mammals. I've clicked on the mammals. It gives me some information here about some specific programs, but as I scroll down, there's this thing right here that says species abstracts. So these are all the species that are covered, but these are not hyperlinked. You unfortunately have to go to the species abstract. And then once you're here, brings up a Google Drive. Again, I have not logged in. I'm going to bring up a Google Drive with all of those same mammals. So this is just the way it's organized. I don't have control over this part of the website. So they're organized by species name. So that's where this, going back to this main page, if you can figure out what you're interested in looking at. So if you're interested in looking at the Mexican gray wolf, for example, you can get its species name, which is Canis lupus bailey, and you can try to find that in here, which is right here. I'm going to open up this folder, and it's going to give me the map of where they're located, a picture of the animal, and then the abstract. So if I can bring up the PDF of the abstract, this is a fact sheet, but a far more technical one. So I wouldn't use this under probably high school. Let the high school kids deal with this. So it gives all kinds of information, very technical information about the Mexican gray wolf, where it can be found, reproduction, habitats, the plant community it's found in, population trends, all different type of stuff. Much more technical than the other one. Whole works cited section on there. But there's some other cool information in here if you're interested in a map, for example, of where they're located. The green area over here, if you didn't know, this is where the Mexican wolves have been reintroduced into Arizona. So that's where you can find Mexican gray wolves right now, the only places you can find them. So again, I don't want to spend a ton of time on this, but that is your basic idea of these fact sheets if you're interested in bringing those into your classroom. Scroll through here a little bit. Again, there's lots of resources I encourage you to check out at another time. We have videos, we have maps, but I'm going to go down here to the books and other publications because there's two pieces in here that I want to point out. I'm not going to go again through all of these. But the ones I want to focus on is our magazine and our department publications. So I've mentioned twice now that we publish a magazine. That's where those Focus Wild articles appeared in, and that's where those field notes fact sheets appear in. If you're interested in getting one of those magazines, well, there's a couple ways you can do that. One, you can come to one of my workshops, my in-person workshop, because usually I give away at least one issue of the magazine from there. But you can also just subscribe, and I clicked on that link that said magazine. And you can see here I can subscribe online. It's really not that bad. I believe it's like $8, $8 or $9 for the subscription. So it's $8.50 for 1 year, or 2 issues plus. It's actually 14 issues, so it's 2 years plus 2 issues for $15. And so you have a couple different options here. You can enter the information, you can give it as a gift, and you can submit that, and you'll start getting your issues relatively quick. So there's all sorts of information. We do take articles from people as well. We do contract out sometimes, and we have a calendar issue as well. And the calendar is actually a contest. So if you are a budding wildlife photographer, or you fashion yourself a wildlife photographer, you can submit to get into our calendar issue, which is the last issue, the November-December issue every year, and we award. There's are selected to go in there, and then the 12 months selected in there. So the magazine has all kinds of information. You can extract really cool articles. It is a general interest magazine, so you're going to find hunting and fishing articles, but you're going to find places to go to experience wildlife in Arizona, but you're also going to find articles about what the department does. So you're going to find really cool research articles, like articles talking about what we do, how we track bald eagles, or how do we build roads safer so that elk aren't being hit by cars. We describe all those things. So there's some really cool articles in there. You're going to see a little bit more in just a little bit when I focus on our nonfiction tech stuff. But I wanted to point out the magazine. And the last one I want to point out, again, I'm back just on the main resources page. And I just did the magazines. Now I'm going to come down here to the bottom where it says department publications. These are books that we publish. We have a large collection of books. You can find information. Not all of these are necessarily going to be great for the classroom. I'm going to point out a few that I think might be useful for you. These are books that you can purchase. You could actually buy these at a bookstore too. You could order them on Amazon if you knew how to do that. But you can order them from us. You can see there's a downloading an order form right here. This gives you all the information on the books. It's one PDF that just shows all the publications together and how to order it. But talk about a couple of these that I think might be interesting in your classroom, probably at an older level, or something that you can use as a resource to help you bring some of this wildlife into the classroom. I actually really like this one. That's Introduction to Hunting Arizona Small Game by Randy Babb. It doesn't sound in the beginning like it's going to be good for the classroom. It's focused on hunting and then talks about cooking, but in the front part of it, there's all sorts of natural history information on the animal, the small game animals that you can hunt. So you're going to learn about quail, you're going to learn about rabbit, all kinds of different stuff. All that natural history information is embedded in there, which would be really cool. This other one over here, the Arizona Wildlife Viewing Guide, if you're looking for places to go on field trips, if you have that opportunity, if your school district still allows that, and you want places to go, these are some of the premier sites around the state where you're likely to have a wildlife experience. So all over the state, whether you're in central Arizona, whether you're down in southern Arizona, northern Arizona, eastern, western, it highlights some of the premier sites, and then a number of other sites where you can go and try to see wildlife specifically. So southern Arizona, there's going to be featuring the sandhill cranes. Northern Arizona and central Arizona, you're going to be featuring the bald eagles. There's going to be where you can go to see bison. Kind of cool. It would be a good document, one, for your own recreational purposes, but also if you're looking for cool places to take kids that you might not have been aware of. This field guide to amphibians and reptiles in Arizona, I think, is probably the best field guide on reptiles and amphibians that's ever been made, and it's specific to Arizona. So if you do take on field trips, and you just want to have a resource guide on, hey, what was that snake that we saw? What was that lizard that we saw? Really good resource in here. There's a fishing guide in here. There's a mammalian predators in Arizona, so it focuses on the large mammal predators, so mountain lions, bobcats. It does have a hunting spin on it, but again, just like the other one, really good detailed information. These are professional essays on every different species. So there's stuff on bears, there's stuff on coyotes, there's a chapter on mountain lions, for example. So going through all those. Boulder, I'm not as familiar with the pronghorn or the bow hunting. Um, the one I want to feature then is there's a series of 3 books that is a history series, and it starts with this one that's called Man and Wildlife in Arizona. So what we did was we broke the history of Arizona into 3 main timescales right now. So this is what we call the exploration period. So this is when the trappers were coming through Arizona, when the wagon trains were coming through Arizona, when the 49ers were coming through Arizona, when we were doing the boundary surveys following the Gadsden Purchase, and we needed to figure out where the Mexico and United States border was going to be. We ran a U.S. survey along the border. All those people were taking journal. They wrote journals. That is our window into the past on what Arizona's wildlife looked like. So this is a really good book that describes kind of our wildlife situation over the course of those 40 or so years. That's the first in the series. And then scrolling up here, there's 2 more in the series. Arizona Wildlife, the Territorial Years, which is 1863 to 1912, so when we were a territory. So this is the sequel to another one, again, talking about wildlife during that time. What did it look like? And then the final one, I don't actually, so it's over here. There's not a picture for it, but it's right next to our field guide. Bringing Back the Game, which is now 1912 to 1962. So roughly the first 50 years of statehood. What did it look like? How did we bring back the wildlife? So this is a series of wildlife books. Good for you as an educator, possibly bringing them into a high school classroom. I'm going to show you one tool that we have for the first one, that Man and Wildlife. So I want you to remember this book here, all the way down at the bottom, this Man and Wildlife in Arizona. I have a reading guide that accompanies that. So if you wanted to bring that into the classroom, again, probably at a high school level, maybe a middle school level, but there's a reading guide that accompanies that if you wanted to. Or you just get the information for your own that you can use and then bring that information to the classroom. We do offer a deal if you were to buy all 3 of those together. All right. So that's the reading information, the publications that we can get in. I'm done with that. What I want to do is get to the heart of what I wanted to talk about. And to do that, this hasn't appeared on the resources section yet. I haven't added it. I have to go back and do that. So I'm going to go back to the main Focus Wild page. So I'm not going all the way back to the main department site. I'm just going back to the Focus Wild home, which brings me back. There's my little teacher quail. And under popular links, remember I mentioned that at the beginning, there's one here that says nonfiction texts. This is a really cool resource. So we had teachers for a number of years that kept coming to us saying, we need more subject matter text. We need nonfiction texts in that discipline. And so they kept asking me if I had anything. Because I'm only one person, and if I'm doing the workshops and doing all this other stuff, very hard to sit down and write a bunch of relevant text for the classroom. But it was an important feature. What we know from our testing in Arizona is that Arizona students do really well on fiction-based reading. We have no problem with that. It is this nonfiction text. So where we could provide some support while also introducing some wildlife concepts is to introduce some of these nonfiction texts. So these are texts that were designed, these particular ones were designed specifically to go into your classroom. Now, where they come from for the most part is from our magazine. Now, before I jump to that a little bit, so this is the page, we call it Reading Wild, where you're going to find most of the stuff. But I do want to point out right here on the top here, you have the home, but then there's a thing over here that says other reading resources. If you were to click on that, we're going to start throwing in some other relevant information. This children's book link I just checked today actually is relevant. This wasn't not relevant. It's not live anymore. That's an exterior link. We were linking to an author's page who had some resources related to a book that she wrote. The book is out of print and those resources aren't available. She's changed her website, so the link is dead. I'm going to change it. I actually have some of those resources still available, so I'm probably going to link to my own copies of them. But then it says nonfiction books here. So you'll see that's that Man and Wildlife in Arizona. Remember I told you to remember the first history book that we talked about the exploration period. So these are the reading guides that accompany that. So there's some information. So if you were to click here on the book info, that's the publications piece. I got to update that link. My apologies for that. But if you're looking for the reading lesson, This is the reading guide that accompanies that. So if you were having your kids read that book in class, this gives you chapter by chapter. It introduces vocabulary. It does comprehension questions for each chapter. So as they're reading, that you can make sure you're testing their knowledge. So there's all kinds of different stuff in here. You'll read it in here. There's the standards it addresses. They're still set to the old science standards. I haven't had a chance to update them yet. And then you would just click download now to see that document. And then there's another one in here, which is the journaling lesson. So in addition to a reading guide, we've created some lessons. Because this book is focused on historic journals, we have a lesson focused on the kids journaling and how do they write journals, and then how do we understand journals? How do we look at old historic journals, things from Lewis and Clark, things from some of our early trappers like James Ohio Patty? How do we read their journals and truly understand what they mean? There's a journaling lesson in there as well. So I just wanted to point that out. I'm going to go back to the main Reading Wild section though and focus on. Now there are two things you're going to find in here. There are let me see, I have some thoughts coming through here that I'll take a look at those questions in just a minute here. There are two pieces to Reading Wild. There are reading sets, and then there are leveled readers. Okay, so I'm going to explain the reading sets first because we only have one of those right now, but I do hope to expand that in the near future. The reading set that we have right now is on this passenger pigeon. So the way that this page is structured, there's a couple different ways you can find the reading material that you're looking for. If you know a particular Lexile level that you're trying to reach, and right now with the content we have up there, they're all higher Lexile levels, but we have ones in the process that are going to get down. I'd like to get this all the way down to a kindergarten Lexile level, more or less. But you could search by Lexile level. You could search by topic over here. So if there's a specific topic that you're looking at, you could do that. You can also come over here if there's you can see what I've added recently. The most recent one I've added is the passenger pigeon one, and this is the reading set. Now, the reading set is where the kids have the opportunity to read two or more articles or passages about a particular topic, and then kind of compare and contrast those two articles. So it's a set of reading that they can do. This one happens to be on the passenger pigeon, and the extinction of the passenger pigeon gives some information on it. There are two articles in this set. Both of them are speeches that were given. The first one was given in 1947 when a monument was created honoring the passenger pigeon. The passenger pigeon went extinct in 1914. In 1947, we created not in Arizona, but there was a monument created about the passenger pigeon. And Aldo Leopold, who was a famous, he's considered the father of wildlife biology and wildlife management, he wrote a speech on the passenger pigeon and what this monument means. And then in 2014, 100 years after the extinction of the passenger pigeon, we had another professor give a speech about the passenger pigeon. So the kids can read both of these speeches, and then they can compare and contrast them. And so you'll see in here, there's PDF. So Article 1 is right here. There's a PDF, and all I got to do is click on the PDF button, and it brings up the speech that Aldo Leopold gave. Structured this in an education format. So we've labeled each of the paragraphs. So you can go through here. The reading is in here. This is one that isn't leveled because this is the speech as Leopold gave it. I didn't want to change it and water it down or do anything like that. But once they're done, this particular reading passage has questions related to it. So there are text-dependent questions specific to this reading. So you can see that they have to identify the main idea. They have to try to use context clues to figure out the definition of effigy. There's some other questions in here. And then there's some critical thinking questions. So there's text-dependent questions and critical thinking questions, all getting them to build those skills that they're going to need when they take the AZ Merit and some of the other tests that they're going to have to take. So you can introduce these while doing that. So this is the Leopold essay. You can also download the other speech that takes place in 2014. And then if you want the reading set, it's down here at the bottom where it says reading set questions. So you could assign just one of the essays. just have the kids read one of the essays. But if you had them read both of them, we've provided you information on how the kids can kind of compare and contrast and utilize how do these work together. And so in this case, they've read both articles, the on a monument to the pigeon and the passenger pigeon monument rededication speech, and they get to kind of compare and contrast what is the tone, the mood, and the theme. So you're introducing some of these literary concepts. And then there's some other lessons again where they have to integrate both articles that they read and kind of look at them in context together. So we provide all that information. We will be adding more reading sets as I find relevant and useful and interesting readings that I want to introduce. But the main part of the Reading Wild program is our leveled readers. And what we've done with the leveled readers, this is directly in response to the teachers coming to us saying we need more text that we can bring into the classroom. As I mentioned, I don't always have the time to write that text and have, research it, have it edited, do all that stuff. So what we've done is we already had a source of information and text in our magazine. So every issue of the magazine usually has some article that I think is really, really interesting to teachers and to students, whether it's talking about an animal and something unique about an animal, or whether it's talking about some of the research that we do, or how we manage wildlife, how we track wildlife. There's always something in each issue of the magazine that I think is interesting. So what I'm doing is I'm extracting that article. The problem is that article is typically written at a high school level. We don't do that on purpose. When our publications department sits down and asks people to write articles, we don't say we're gearing it towards a high school audience. That's just what happens. So that's not going to work for all of you guys. If you have fourth graders, that's not going to work. The high school level is going to be a little bit high for them. So what we've done then is I bring in experts, I bring in teachers, I bring in myself, whatever it might be, and we scale each of those readings down at least twice. Okay, so there's going to be the main one that's at a high school level, but then we're going to have one that's a couple lexile below that, and then another one that's a couple hundred lexile below that. I'm going to give you an example. So let's say I'm interested in adaptations. So I'm going to go here to adaptations. And you can see that there's a couple different topics. There's one on Arizona's Wonder Rabbit, there's How to Train Fish, and there's one on Little Digger, which is about burrowing owls. Let's say I'm interested in the burrowing owl one, the Little Digger. So I click on this. And again, just like all the other things I've shown you, there's a little bit of a description of what the article's about, so you can get a quick idea if this is something you want to bring in your classroom. But then there are 3 versions of this article. Okay. There's version 1, which is found at a lexile level of 810. There's version 2, which is at 1030, and there's version 3, which is at 1150. This is the same article. We've just scaled it to different lexile levels. So we've simplified the information. We've taken out stuff, changed vocabulary, whatever it might be, to make sure that we can bring it down to those different lexile levels. So the highest one, the version 3, is the original magazine article. So I'm going to click on this. So you'll see this is what the original magazine article more or less looked like. I put it into education format. So there was no edits to this. This is as it appeared more or less in the magazine. We show you the lexile, how big it is, or how long it is. You can see all the pictures that came into the magazine. So it's a lengthy article. It's got some information, but again, just like reading sets, we have text dependent questions. So if you wanted to bring this article into your classroom, you could do that. There's text dependent questions, and then there's critical thinking questions. Now, what we've done is taken the same article. I'm going to scroll up to the top so you can see how these change. Right, I'm going to go back to the main page, and I'm going to bring up the lowest one now. I'm going to skip the middle one. You don't need to see all 3 of them. So that one was at an 1150. I'm going to bring up the one that's at an 810 lexile. We're not going to read all this information, but there's some differences. One, that the text is a little bit bigger. We've separated out. It becomes a little bit easier to read. You can see how it changes. This one happened to be much more driven on these large paragraphs. This one, it simplifies a little bit, so it's at an 810 reading level. But a lot of the same content is there. We've just simplified to allow a lower level reader to be able to do this. And again, text dependent questions and those critical thinking questions in here. So the cool thing about this is there's a couple different ways that teachers are utilizing this in their classroom. You could say that you just want to pick one of them. Maybe you just want the 810 level in your classroom. So everybody in your classroom gets the 8-10 level. You're not worried about the higher information, and that's all you want to do because you think that's all your students can do. The other thing that you can do, obviously, is you can differentiate instruction, right? So you could have certain kids reading the higher one, certain kids reading the lower one, certain kids reading another one. You don't necessarily have to tell them. They might, that they're smart. They can sometimes figure that out. But they're all reading the same information. They're just reading it at their level. Okay, so this is in a direct response to what the teachers were asking for. We don't have a ton of these yet. These do take time to develop. My goal, though, is to go back at least 3 or 4 years and continuing on forward and extract at least one article from every magazine that we've done this particular work to. And then in the future, we'll be moving forward. So when the magazine gets published, this will already be developed with it. So once it gets published, you'll be able to download this version as well. So those are resources that we think are very, very powerful, that we think you can use in the classroom, that are addressing that need that teachers have already come up. Oh, and I did forget to mention, all of these come with the teacher keys too. So I don't include them in the original one, but if you come back to this main page, you can see the teacher keys. So on those text-dependent questions and those critical thinking questions, you can see we've included the teacher key here. The red text shows you what we thought be the answer. Some of these they're going to be answers might vary and so on. All right. So I believe that is most of our reading resources that I wanted to focus on with you guys today. I'm going to go back first of all to our main wild web page so you can get an idea again of what this looks like. That didn't work. Go back. I have to go back and fix one of those links. So all kinds of articles. We'll be adding more. I've got a whole bunch that are already in development on my desk. We just have to run them through an editor and they will get put back on here as well. So we'll be expanding this library, but we wanted to get these out as soon as possible so that you guys can start utilizing some of these. We've already had a lot of success. A lot of teachers have already been commenting on them and have enjoyed them and are using them. With that, I'm going to go back to our main Focus Wild website. And I'm going to leave this here. I'm going to look through the questions. I do see some questions and some comments that came through the chat. If you have additional questions or comments, please try to get those in, and then we will wrap up here in just a minute. So I'm going to take a look at what's come through the chat, and then if you have additional things to add, feel free to do that. See what's been added in here. I think it's addressing those fact sheets that were put on there, the field notes, and probably the research abstracts as well, depending on the age level. But they say that their students do wildlife biology research by monitoring the birds that are coming to the school's bird feeders and using a game camera, that they could use those readings to supplement what they're doing so they could learn about the birds that are coming to their feeder. They could probably, of course, then create reports, doing compare contrast of different species that they're seeing. And then another comment that the book that we're talking about, that Man and Wildlife in Arizona, the one that we've created the reading guide and the journal articles for, comment that was an awesome book, and I tend to agree. When I first picked up that Man and Wildlife book, I thought it was going to be dull and boring. It was some guy's master's thesis, I think, was the original one, and I thought it was going to be boring. But it was actually really, really fascinating to read it and get into the minds of these early explorers. And the way it's done, it's really well done. You're not just reading the journals; they take extracts from the journals and then they do their own interpretation of it. My goal is we're going to eventually create interactive maps that tie in with that book. So you'll be able to follow in the footsteps of these early explorers and look at their journals at specific days and specific locations, and we can compare that to what that looks like today. So for example, what my dream one to do is to do one on Powell, John Wesley Powell, and his journey down through the Grand Canyon, down the Colorado River. And he journaled every day about what he was seeing. What I'd love to do is map his travels through the Grand Canyon and then put a split screen up. So when you click on a particular day, you'll see his description or his drawing, because he did drawings of what he saw, and then a modern day picture of what it looks like today. And the kids can start thinking about why it looks different or why it hasn't changed and so on. So we're going to do some of those types of things. So with that, I don't see any more questions coming through right now, but if you do have questions, I encourage you to send them through. Again, this was a slightly different format for our webinars. I just wanted to introduce you to some of these topics because they can kind of be hard to find on our website. I wanted to make sure you understood where you could find these resources and what they were. Hopefully, over the course of this last hour, you've been able to find something that you think you could adapt or bring into your classroom in some way. I'm going to stay on for a few more minutes and answer any last minute questions that might come in. When you log out of this, when you leave the webinar, it's going to pop up with a quick survey. I think it's just like 6 or 7 questions. You'll just spend a couple minutes answering, not even a couple minutes, 30 seconds answering those questions. And then later this evening, there should be an automated email that comes to you with a link to your certificate. So it'll pop up with your certificate you can access for your professional development for 1 hour. Thank you. I'm going to turn my mic off for a little bit while I wait for questions, and I'll probably be on for the next minute or two unless we get some questions. So thanks a lot for coming out, guys. I appreciate it.